Taoiseach, I honestly believe that this security and neutrality forum that you're setting up is part of a sustained campaign by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to dismantle Irish neutrality, and that agenda of undermining, eroding and dismantling Ireland's neutrality is a long-standing objective of the two major parties in government, and that you are cynically using the utterly horrendous situation in Ukraine and the barbaric invasion by Russia of Ukraine to advance a project within NATO and the European Union of ratcheting up the militarisation of the European Union, developing a European army, moving closer to United States foreign policy in a way that is probably the greatest threat to Ireland's security. Now, you of course will shake your head and say that's not true. But I just think we have to look not at simply people's assertions, but we need to look at certain facts. This week, NATO naval chiefs are in Cork with Irish naval chiefs. At the end of last year, we had NATO assessment of Irish forces in Cork by a NATO General Sam Mason. Of course it's true, right? And you can read the reports in your own newspapers about it, and the comments from Irish military chiefs about NATO presence there. Okay? I didn't interrupt you. I didn't interrupt you. So we are clearly cooperating, as we are through PESCO, through the battle groups, interoperability with NATO, structured cooperation with NATO, and of course, in the context of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, we have attended, confirmed by Minister Coveney when he was the Minister, 3 meetings at NATO military bases to discuss the situation in Ukraine. And I thought it was very, very interesting just to see who the sort of attendees that were present at some of these meetings, but as well as the usual suspects of all the major NATO powers, all the major European powers, you also had, for example, Israel participating in these meetings. Now, you see, to me, that gives the game away, because no one doubts the barbarism of what Putin has done in Ukraine, or for that matter, the barbarism of what the Russians did in Chechnya, or previously in Afghanistan, or what they did in Syria. Nobody could possibly doubt that. But your narrative is to say that that has fundamentally changed the security situation in a way that we should enhance our relationship with NATO and the project of EU militarisation, and effectively, although you won't admit this, but effectively further undermine Irish neutrality. Now, you see, if Putin's illegal, barbaric, murderous invasion of Ukraine is criminal, and if we need to stand up against this breach of the international rules-based order, if we need to stand up against war crimes and crimes against humanity, then surely you would follow, you would take the same attitude towards other states that are guilty of egregious, brutal breaches of territorial integrity, egregious commissions of crimes against humanity and war crimes. Surely you would do that if you were being honest about your commitment to neutrality and things like the international rules-based order. But neither you or the European Union or the United States are, because you have no problem at all with US arms exports in the billions to the Saudi regime. You don't. You're not crying foul about that. Even though we know, and every international human rights organisation is saying the biggest humanitarian disaster in the world at the moment is in Yemen. And that is a result of Saudi military intervention in a neighbour's country, bombing with weapons provided by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and other major EU military exporting countries, Spain, Italy, and so on, who are also ratcheting up their arms sales and their arms exports. But you say nothing about that. Or Israel. Billions of European and United States military support, arms sales to Israel, even though it is involved since its very foundation and on an ever-worsening basis in breaches of the Palestinian territorial integrity, of crimes against humanity, war crimes, the siege of Gaza, administrative detention, and where even its leaders are publicly saying they want to get rid of the Palestinians. I mean, they're publicly said, they're not even hiding it. Where they're ethnically cleansing Jerusalem, Palestinian territory, where they have no intention of vindicating the rights of Palestinians under international law, such as the right to return. Where they're absolutely stating, we will never do that, even though Palestinians have those rights under international law. What does the European Union do? Does it impose the sort of sanctions it imposed on Putin? No. It gives favoured trade status to Israel. It attends meetings of NATO with Israel. European countries send billions worth of arms to Israel, and they do not even consider, in fact they actively resist, sanctions. And then you say, we must do something about the triple lock, i.e. undermine Irish neutrality, because it's completely wrong that Russia can veto UN security resolutions. I agree that it is wrong that one of the biggest military powers in the world can veto UN resolutions. But why is it you don't say that about the United States vetoing those resolutions? As it has done time and time again with any resolution that seeks to sanction Israel, or indeed any of its allies. Nobody was screaming for reform of the UN when the United States did that on multiple occasions. You see, you're just not being consistent or balanced in your apparent horror of war and abuses of human rights and war crimes or whatever. Even the International Criminal Court. Everybody's saying Putin, and he should be held accountable for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Ukraine. But when the same point is put to Joe Biden about the war crimes and crimes against humanity that Israel is committing against the Palestinians, Biden says, oh, Israel's not a signatory of the International Criminal Court. And by the way, neither is the United States. So we're not accountable to the International Criminal Court. They think Putin should be accountable to the International Criminal Court, but Israel shouldn't be. The United States shouldn't be. And you say nothing about that. Oh, come on. You want us to ally in a military alliance headed up by the United States. Well, we're cooperating with them on a daily basis. That's what PESCO is about. But you don't draw the distinction. Now, neutrality, let's be clear, what is Irish neutrality? You know, because it's not clearly defined, but it's very apparent from our history what it was, and the people who set up the Irish Neutrality League, Connolly and Pearse, right? It was the First World War that was absolutely key in motivating the leaders of the 1916 rebellion to instigate that rebellion. I mean, they wanted Irish independence and freedom long before that, but they believed the outbreak of the First World War made it absolutely imperative that there was a rebellion in Dublin against that war. Because thousands and thousands of Irish people were going out to be slaughtered in an inter-imperialist conflict. And they were clear, we are not taking sides between these brutal military powers. That is the truth about neutrality, right? That is the truth about neutrality. And I'll tell you this, Taoiseach, you know, when you talk about security threats, in my strongly held view, the best protection Irish troops have and this country have is the reputation we have of being a former colonial country that has opposed war and imperialism and that is not part of any of the big military imperialist blocs. And if we become associated with US, UK, European foreign policy, that will actually seriously threaten the safety of our troops around the world. I honestly believe that. It will undermine a precious reputation that we've built up as a country that's opposed to colonialism, discrimination, oppression by big powers in particular. And we will become associated with the war crimes of the sort the United States committed in Iraq, that Israel commits against the Palestinians. That would be a disaster for this country's security, and it would be a thrashing, and is a thrashing, of Irish neutrality.